critical mass here, so we can kick it off. Kate, do you want to get started?
I would love to. Thanks so much for having me. And I am just so excited and energized. No pun intended here, but maybe pun intended. Of all these familiar names and a few new faces to me in the chat. It's just fantastic. So thanks for having me. Kate Mache with the Essex County Community Foundation. I am the VP of Systems Initiative and Gov Relations, and I run the Climate Resilience Initiative. Um, Many of the folks on the call today are here at the invitation of ECCF. So thank you so much for being with us today. And we are grateful for the partnership with Resonant Energy. As many of you know, we rolled out a climate resilience strategy almost exactly 1 year to date for anyone that wants to join us tomorrow at our climate resilience coalition meeting. We'll be celebrating exactly 1 year to the day of the launch of climate resilience, which is a $3 million 5-year investment. And in that, our pillars are flood, heat islands, climate literacy, and energy transition. So as a big part of our strategy on energy transition is ensuring fair and equitable access to energy transition house by house or nonprofit by nonprofit in Essex County. And the partnership with Resonant Energy has allowed us to bring that type of partnership for nonprofits to the table. And so I'll let Resonant Energy and the team take you through what that means. But we're really grateful for that. Times are not easy for our nonprofits. We see that. We see that working with Amy and our community response fund that many of you already know about. Energy costs are very high here in Massachusetts, and any relief, both for the environment and for our budgets, are greatly appreciated. So I return it back over to you all.
Great. Thanks so much, Kate, and thanks everyone for joining on this cold Wednesday, April morning. We're really excited to talk with you about this program that we're running in partnership with ECCF, the Solar Upgrading Nonprofits Program, which, as Kate said, we hope provides an opportunity to think about how you might address rising energy costs, which we are all facing pretty critically right now. So let's dive in. I'll just start by introducing myself. My name's Sana Wright. I'm the Community Partnerships Manager at Resonant Energy. I manage our partnerships and programs that help expand access to solar. That includes the Solar Upgrading Nonprofits Program. I'm a Massachusetts native, and have a background in community development and stakeholder engagement, specifically around the clean energy transition. So I'm very excited to be here with so many local organizations. And my colleague Rachel is also on the call. We're both available to answer questions throughout this webinar, and then also after we'll have some dedicated time for Q&A. So feel free to drop your questions in the chat as we go. Okay, so this webinar is designed for anyone who's interested in participating in or wants to learn more about the SUN grant program. Our goal with this program is really to set up nonprofit organizations for long-term financial success by helping them access meaningful energy savings through solar. Whether you've explored solar before and you're looking for an additional funding source, or it's your very first time exploring solar and are curious to get sort of a very comprehensive overview of your options, you are in the right place. Quick agenda for today. So I will introduce Resonant Energy in a bit more detail and talk about why you might consider going solar at all. And then I will talk us through the state and federal incentives that are currently available to nonprofits right now. And then we'll talk in some more detail about how to enroll in the SUN program. And as I said, we'll have plenty of time for Q&A at the end. So feel free to keep your questions for that portion or drop them in the chat and we'll get to them then. Great. Okay, so who is Resonant Energy? We were founded in 2016 with a mission to expand access to clean energy, and today we do that primarily by helping nonprofit organizations of all sizes and affordable housing developments go solar and take advantage of the available financing and funding opportunities that can otherwise feel difficult to pursue. We have an entire team dedicated to helping our clients apply for state and federal incentives as well as grant opportunities. Our office is based in Boston. Most of our projects are in Massachusetts, have been in Massachusetts, but we recently expanded into Connecticut and Rhode Island and have done some projects in New York as well. We are B Corp certified and employee owned. We are a full service solar developer, which means that we manage the entire construction project from start to finish, including all the sort of preliminary analysis work, all the way through permitting, interconnection, installation, and then also provide operations and monitoring support. So you will only have to interface with us throughout the entire project's life cycle. We can support solar integration into new construction projects as well as on existing buildings. And as I mentioned, we have an entire team dedicated to understanding and helping our customers successfully capture all the incentives that are available to them at any given moment. Partnership and accountability have been at the center of our outreach approach since we started back in 2016. We really want to work with others towards a shared goal of expanding access to solar and believe that community organizations like ECCF and our other partners can speak best to their network's needs and current barriers. And in that, most of our clients have come through programs that we run collaboratively, like the SUN program. And then lastly, we also have a strong network of impact financiers and mission aligned lenders to help nonprofits without a lot of capital explore no cost options and grant and loan opportunities for solar as well. These are some of the clients and partners we've developed strong relationships with over the last decade or so of our work. We are in the sixth phase of a campaign with LISC Massachusetts to support affordable housing developers as they consider solar, and in the second year of a campaign and program with the City of Cambridge to support City of Cambridge property owners as they are installing solar on their buildings. Through this work, we've installed nearly 400 solar projects for individual organizations. Here is just a small sample of projects that you might recognize in Essex County, including churches, food pantries, affordable housing. While we mostly do rooftop arrays like the ones you'll see here, we're increasingly doing parking canopies as well, or carports, especially as incentives for those have gotten a lot stronger. And we've really carved out a niche and sort of specific expertise in building projects at this scale here. We build anywhere from as small as 25 kilowatts to just over a megawatt, which is unlike other developers that are focused on either residential projects, on single family homes, or the larger utility scale projects you might see um, along the side of the highway or across rural farmlands. And then last year, through our work with our partners, we launched the first round of SUN and supported more organizations than we could have imagined. So we applied for a second round of funding with Mass CEC and are excited to be partnering with ECCF this round to bring this program to more organizations across the state. And the goal, as I said, of this program is really to make solar exploration more accessible to busy nonprofits by providing no-cost technical assistance. You'll receive stipends to cover staff time invested in the process, as well as grant writing support if you do move forward with solar and need funds to cover the cost of installation. We recognize that organizations have a lot of competing priorities, and so the goal is that through this program, you have sort of a seamless and approachable pathway to solar exploration. In round one of the program that just wrapped up last year, we significantly surpassed our goal of providing 750 kilowatts of solar analysis. We provided over 3,800 kilowatts of solar analysis by the end of the program. And the 7 organizations from phase one who are officially moving forward with solar will collectively save nearly 17 million in electricity costs and thereby operating expenses over the next 25 years by installing solar. This was obviously a huge success, and so we're excited to bring back another round at a critical moment where energy costs are, still on the rise more quickly than they ever have been, and also at a time when a lot of the incentives for solar are changing, which I'll talk a little bit more in detail about later. So before we dive into more details on how to get involved in the sun program, you may be asking yourself, why go solar? Especially when, as I said, there are so many other projects you could be spending your time on. So I'll just take a moment to highlight some of the reasons our customers and partners are continuing to go solar. So the primary driver, as you might guess, of solar is rising electricity prices. The cost of electricity is consistently on the rise, and this is particularly the case in Massachusetts. You can see here in this graph from the U.S. Energy Information Administration that there's not only a clear upward trend in average electricity prices, but that Massachusetts electricity prices are significantly higher than the national average. That's the black line here versus the national average is the red line. And this is in large part because the state of Massachusetts continues to rely on oil and gas, which are imported and therefore subject to inflation and unpredictable price spikes that are spurred by global events like we're experiencing right now and things like tariffs. Um, and the governor had predicted that the cost of electricity would rise even more quickly before under the new admin, and that has certainly been the case so far. But in conjunction with high electricity prices, Massachusetts actually has some of the best solar incentives in the country, which likely explains. Rachel, would you mind going to the next slide? Thank you. Which likely explains why solar deployment is so high. We're 11th in the nation for solar deployment. And not to mention, it's one of the most reliable ways to protect against the increasing costs and price spikes that I highlighted in the last slide. And the leading incentive program in Massachusetts is called SMART. It's a program that offers monthly cash payments to anyone who owns a solar system. This, paired with some really strong state grant opportunities, means that solar makes a lot of financial sense in Massachusetts, especially for nonprofits who are increasingly feeling the strain of operating costs. And I'll get into the details of both the SMART program and the grant opportunities a bit later. But here's what we tend to see when nonprofits go solar. Installing solar means you are no longer reliant on oil, gas, or other imported fuels. Instead, you are what we like to call energy self-sufficient. You're producing clean energy on site that is insulated from inflation, tariffs, and price spikes. And this increased resiliency saves organizations anywhere from 40 to 100% of their electricity bills and allows them to be more financially focused on their missions. Here's an example of what that looks like on your bill. This is a client who in November 2021 had an electricity bill of nearly $1,400, and in December 2024, after installing solar, they covered all their electricity needs with that system and did not have to pay anything to their utility. So now that you have an idea of what impact going solar can have for your organization, I'll talk a little bit more about what incentives are available to you right now in addition to the SUN program, and how we're helping our customers kind of navigate changes in these incentives that you may or may not have already heard of. So many of you probably know about the Inflation Reduction Act, or the IRA. It was passed in 2022 and significantly improved the economics of solar, especially for nonprofits. It was the largest climate bill ever passed by Congress and still to this day offers some of the strongest incentives for solar. At a very high level, the IRA increased the base federal tax credit. You can see that here in yellow, to 30%. Previously, it was 22%, and initially locked it in for 10 years. And then on top of that, some projects can qualify for additional tax credit adders depending on location, community impact, or domestic equipment sourcing. So we tend to see an average of 40 to 50% tax credit for our clients. And most importantly, for nonprofits, the IRA introduced a provision called direct pay or elective pay. That means that tax exempt organizations can receive the tax credit as a cash reimbursement from the IRS, typically in the first year after the system has been turned on. But unfortunately, under Trump's recent federal tax bill that was passed last summer, much of the IRA was undone and set the tax credits to phase out in December of 2027, which is much earlier than initially planned. But there is still time to act. For one, you could try to get your solar system on by the end of 2027, or as we're doing with most of our customers, you can safe harbor the tax credit by July of this year, July 2026, um, which buys you an additional 4 years to build your project. Instead of having to complete it by the end of 2027, you would have until July of 2030. So if you apply for Sun now, there will still be plenty of time for us to help you pursue the safe harbor route, which just requires a signed contract and a deposit on the project. And the good news is that the tax credit phase out has actually coincided with the launch of Smart 3, which is a new version of the state incentive program that I mentioned earlier. The original SMART incentives were based on a declining block structure that had pretty much been used up. All the funds had pretty much been used up by last year. And so this new program, which has been redesigned, offers significantly higher incentives across all projects. So this means that if you don't capture the tax credit, your project will still benefit from significantly better state incentives. And overall, at this moment in time, I'd say incentives are still strong, but timing just matters a little bit more than it did before. And so that's something that we can help you navigate. So with the tax credit still in place, there's a bit of a rare overlap of incentives right now that we're referring to as the incentive sweet spot. Organizations like yours are eligible for all of these, which makes solar particularly attractive at this moment in time. The various components of the sweet spot include the Sun program, which is a pre-installation grant, as you know, to help you understand your options. It's the best place to start. We will help you sort of capture the rest of the incentives from there. That's currently in place through July, depending on when exactly funding for those stipends runs out. And then there is an installation grant funded by the Department of Energy Resources. It's a state department called the Low Income Services Solar Program for projects that serve or are located in environmental justice communities. That's a $6 million pot. The last round opens mid-May, and we're proud to share that two of the three awardees from the first round of applications were our clients, and we expect more success as they announce the results of the second and third rounds. So far, I believe it's been 850,000 that's been awarded, and we've applied for a total of $3.5 million in funding across 16 organizations. So we're very excited to keep helping organizations apply for this last round, because this is a really incredible opportunity to sort of fund the install of your system. And then, of course, the tax credit and the SMART incentive are in place right now still. The safe harbor deadline in July is sort of the end of this sweet spot. And then for the SMART 3, the new incentive is locked in for the rest of this year. So here's just a visual of the timeline, the sweet spot began in January with the launch of Sun Phase 2 and Smart 3, and then we'll end in July when the Safe Harbor deadline hits. And keep in mind that you don't actually need to start the project to lock in these incentives, as in you don't need to start construction on site. So while this may not seem like a lot of time, especially if you're just starting to think about solar, we will be able to help you get there if you apply to Sun in the coming weeks, and most importantly, sort of buy those extra 4 years if you're not ready to start construction right away. And here's an example of an organization we're working with that took advantage of all those incentives that I just covered and was able to get 100% of their installation costs covered. They participated in the last round of the Sun program, got a 2.5K stipend to cover the preliminary design and feasibility study. Then we helped them apply for the LISP grant. They received the maximum award amount of 500K to cover the cost of the system, a portion of the cost of the system. They will be reimbursed for that within the year. And then the tax credit is covering the remaining portion of the upfront cost that will also be reimbursed within the year. And then the SMART incentive, the SMART 3 incentive that they're enrolling in, that'll just act as an additional revenue stream for the organization. So over the course of 20 years, they will have a total revenue of 685,000 through the SMART program. And because they're not using any of that to pay off the upfront cost, since they are doing that with the LISP grant and the tax credit, that is just sort of extra money that they're earning by installing solar. And so over the course of the system's 25-year lifetime, they will save nearly $3 million with an IRR of almost 40%. So that's sort of a best case scenario of what's possible when you capture all those incentives that are available right now. Um, but I just want to highlight that if you don't, on the next slide, I have an example of what it looks like to install solar before July 4th and capture that tax credit versus after July 4th. And you'll see that solar is still a great option, even in a post-tax credit landscape. So while we're really here to help you capture as many incentives as possible, if that timeline is feeling, kind of short, stressful, we are still happy to work with you and work along whatever timeline makes the most sense for your organization. And you'll see here, this is an organization that's considering a 300 kilowatt array totaling just over 930,000. If they go the safe harbor route, they will receive that $279,000 reimbursement through the tax credit. That'll bring them to a 7-year payback period and about 12.3% IRR. If they don't go that route, the payback period goes up a little bit as a result of not receiving that reimbursement in the first year, which brings down their IRR to 8.3. But in both cases, they are receiving that Smart 3 incentive revenue stream, which for this project is over $680,000 over the course of 20 years. And so in either scenario, they're saving well over $1 million on operating expenses by going solar. Okay, so now that you're all up to date on solar policy, which, don't need to retain any of it, we'll take care of that once we start working with you and understand a little bit more about your organization and the specific site that you're considering solar for. Um, but let's dive into the details of Sun and how to participate. So here's how much you can expect to receive as a Sun participant. The stipends vary depending on your building portfolio size and will be awarded after we review the feasibility analysis with you and your team. And the best way to get started is to fill out an application I'll drop the link in the chat and also pull it up on the next slide. It's a very short Google form that we use to get connected with you and take an initial look at your site. We'll respond to your application typically within a week, and if you're accepted, set up an intro call with you to kick off the process. And after you complete the Sun program, of course, we hope that you'll proceed with solar, but it's not required. You will still get your stipend. But if you do, we can help you apply for additional grant funding, such as the LISP grant program that I talked about, to help cover the cost of your system. So as I said, here's the link to the program webpage. There's an application button there, and I'll also drop that in the chat. You can also feel free to reach out directly to me if you have any questions before getting started, and I'd be happy to answer any. And I think with that, we'll open up the floor to Q&A. Thanks everyone for tuning in. I see Rachel dropped the link in the chat. Thank you. And let's see, I think we have one question from Alan. Alan says, all of these incentives sound great. If we want to take advantage of the federal tax credit, what do we need to do by the July 4th deadline? That's a great question. So in order to meet the requirements for safe harbor by July 4th, you have to sign a contract with a solar installer and you have to make a 5 to 10% down payment on the total project cost. Um, Usually that covers sort of general engineering that we'll do. It doesn't actually require us to begin construction on site. And just in doing that, you'll have 4 years, you'll buy yourself 4 years to actually finish the installation. Any other questions?
Donna, we have one in the Q&A. If the
Oh,
entity is a nonprofit, how is the federal tax credit applied?
oh, great question. Sorry, I missed the Q&A window. Yes, that's a great question. So the provision direct pay that was instated with the IRA allows nonprofits to capture the tax credit as a check reimbursement from the IRS. So instead of it coming in the form of a tax credit, you'll just get a check from the IRS that's worth the same sort of dollar amount. And that doesn't require much paperwork, but we can help you with that process. It's very easy. Hmm. One question about in Danvers, I believe the electricity provider is a private company. Does that make any difference? Um, is that Danvers is in a municipal light plant?
Municipal
Municipal
light.
light plant.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, that's a great question. So munis do operate a little differently um, than Eversource and National Grid or Unitil, which are those are the three sort of privately owned utility companies. And then in some cities, there are publicly owned um, electricity infrastructure, basically. And that's the case in Danvers. And so electricity rates do tend to be lower in those cities. The main difference is that you aren't eligible for the SMART incentive that I talked about, the state incentive, since those are run sort of through the private utilities. Um, but you're still eligible for the tax credit. Sometimes there are some restrictions on what types of systems are able to be installed in munis. So that's something that we can look at specifically for your site. But feel free to get in touch with us and we can see what's possible. Um, have a question from Brittany. Are building portfolios a combination of existing buildings and new construction? Would that still qualify? Yes, that definitely still qualifies. We have sort of two specialties in our organization, one that focuses, or two teams, one that focuses on new construction and one that focuses on retrofits on existing buildings. So we can work with building. We frequently work with building portfolios that are a combination of the two. And a question from Max, is it feasible to consider projects on properties that are leased with enough years on the lease or only owned properties? That's a great question. So we do find that it's easiest to work with owned properties, but we also work with customers who lease their properties. It kind of just depends on what the terms of the lease are and what your relationship with the landlord is. So feel free to reach out, and if you have roof rights, you have a good relationship with your landlord and are able to move the project forward despite not being the owner, then we can certainly work with you. And how much time, question from Karen, how much time is required from staff and what type of support do they need to provide? Yeah, that's a good question. So just for the Sun program, for the upfront kind of feasibility, we usually have about a 30-minute intake call where we learn a little bit more about your site and your solar priorities. And then in order for us to actually do the analysis, we'll need a few pieces of information from you, including roof age and a copy of your latest electricity bill. And then we'll put together a proposal based on the analysis, and then we'll schedule about an hour-long meeting with anyone on your team who might be interested in attending to review the results of the analysis. So that's sort of the time commitment, those two meetings, and then whatever time you spend kind of digging up those materials that we need. So it's relatively, um, you know, low touch, just depending on whether or not some of that critical building information is very accessible to you or not.
Sana, can I hop in here? Rachel, you replied to Jocelyn's comment in the chat, but for those that can't see it, I think it's a good one to point out that if you're the only one from your organization, or you have to go to your board members, or you have other team members that want to learn more, will you sit down with them? Will you help organizations talk to their boards and staff about it?
Yes, we certainly will, and we do that all the time. So we are happy to, you know, just have an intro call where we explain this program to your team. Sometimes the team doesn't, or the other team members don't come on until the analysis is ready. It's totally up to you and what your sort of decision making process is. But we're happy to meet sort of in whatever capacity is necessary with your team. And we'll also share these slides with you all, so that can also be a starting point for getting the information out to other folks on your team.
And I think part two of Jocelyn's question is also really helpful for people to know too, because she had asked if there's a cost associated with the analysis. And so if you just want to take people through the cost of the analysis, and also that the program pays for site time, I think that's really important for your time to think at the nonprofit level and to be working with Resonant on this throughout the process, I think is really important. Do you mind saying that one more time?
Yeah, so the cost of the analysis is covered by the program, as Rachel said. So there are no costs associated with participating in the program. In fact, you are actually paid for your time spent participating in the program. Um, the only cost that you would incur comes after the program, after you've already received your stipend, if you decide to proceed with solar. And then, of course, depending on the financing arrangement that we decide to proceed with, you may or may not be responsible for paying for the solar system. But as far as just the analysis goes, the sort of upfront exploration that comes at no cost to you. And through this program, you actually receive a stipend for the time spent invested in that process.
Thank you for doing that again because I think it's so important and so rare for a
Hmm.
nonprofit. I wish I could see everyone's face because I'm jazzed about that. To actually be seen physically and monetarily for the time that your team and you do on the ground and how important everyone's work is every day anyways. The ability to be able to think about something, explore it, see what that is, without having to risk to your board, to your other staff members that you're losing money on the analysis and then you're not gonna go forward with it or something happens that you've lost money. And in fact, this is just time to think about strategy as part of your strategic thinking and your planning, as part of your energy planning and budgeting for the future, and that you will get a stipend for that time to cover your staff time. I think is just really really important and very very unique. So thank you for emphasizing that again, and thanks Jocelyn for
Yeah.
bringing that up.
Yeah, thanks, Kate, for explaining that so well. That's exactly the point. Just that, there is no risk sort of associated with doing this type of analysis and understanding how solar might help your organization. Thanks for all the great questions. Okay, well, we may be able to give everyone some of their time back unless there are any last questions. As I said, you can feel free to reach out directly to me with any other questions that come up. And otherwise, we'll look forward to getting your applications.
And just thanks again to Sada and Rachel from Resonant and the partnership here. ECCF, I put it in the chat, but we are really excited about an opportunity to take an energy transition strategy right to the ground here with our nonprofits, saving you time and budgeting and giving you time to plan. So thank you all, and thanks for the work that you're all doing each and every day. We appreciate you all.
Thanks so much. Yeah, thanks everyone for taking the time to join today and have a wonderful rest of the week. Thanks, Kate. Thanks, Rachel.
Thank you all.